Good afternoon, everyone. Before we dive into today's lecture on law enforcement and the CRM, I want to take a moment to pause, to ground this conversation in reality as well as in humanity. Recently, we've witnessed the deployment of the National Guard in California as well as in Chicago, cities already that's been burdened by layers of trauma. There's been community unrest, political tension, there's economic strain, as well as deep historical wounds around policing and justice. For many people, these deployments have triggered fear, anger, as well as exhaustion. For others, it represents duty, protection, and stability. And the truth is, both can be true at once. Now, when we talk about law enforcement, we're not talking about faceless systems or one sided narratives. More or less, we're talking about human beings on every side of the line. Officers and guardsmen sent into volatile environments, families and residents that's living with the weight of uncertainty, communities remembering past wounds as well as fearing that it can be reopened. Main thing is, we have to understand this is not an us versus them conversation. This is more about a human nervous system. It's a conversation about what happens when everyone in the community lives in a survival mode. So it's really relevant that community resiliency model is something that we should be considering. This is something that can become so vital because CRM allows us to develop and have a framework. And it's not just for therapy, but it's to help us to understand the physiology as well as humanity in these moments of crisis. And for those officers and National Guard members, CRM actually can help teach skills that'll help them to regulate the nervous system, helping them to stay calm, to help them to stay grounded, to be connected, even in times of chaos or during hostile situations. What this does, it'll protect judgment, empathy, as well as their ability to make decisions. In terms of our community, CRM can actually offer more simple body-based tools to help to reduce the amount of fear, to kind of try to bring back balance, and to reclaim a sense of agency in terms of the face of powerlessness. So my hope is, as educators and those that's within the community, that CRM may provide that language to help bridge, not to continue to divide. Help to develop conversations around trauma as well as resilience. We need it now more than ever. Because it's in these moments of collective tension that all of our nervous system is at play. CRM can help us to remember that regulation is contagious, that calm will spread just as quickly as fear does. So, with that, it would be dishonest to pretend that the deployment of the National Guard isn't painful or controversial. It is. It stirs memories of social unrest, inequity, as well as a heavy history of how power and protection have been unequally distributed in this country. But it's equally true that many officers, guardsmen, as well as responders carry these invisible wounds of their own. They have to enter into these spaces with courage, but also with their own nervous system stretched thin from years of exposure to trauma. So tonight we're going to talk about CRM, and its CRM can invite all of us, as well as all of law enforcement, the protester of trembling with fear, or the officer that's gripping his gear too tightly, the community organizer that's trying to hold peace, a mother that may be shielding their child, as well as people in their bodies doing their best to survive in these overwhelming conditions. Tonight we'll be able to try to look at ways to handle that. This is to set the tone. So as I begin this lecture for you this evening, what I want you to take from it is looking again at that community resiliency model and how it teaches us to stop and pause, notice our bodies, look at the topic at hand and how we handle it inside, that level of tension, the breath, our heartbeat, our thoughts, and how we're going to be able to explore trauma, looking at it through the eyes of law enforcement as well as the community. Try to intersect as well as look at how CRM can offer a shared language that provides grounding, recovery, and resilience, not just for those in uniform, but everyone caught in the current crisis. So the goal today is for us to try to start building understanding, because in trauma-informed education, neutrality is apathy and compassion is an action. And CRM will help us to develop a map for that compassion. So with that, I will now get started with our lecture.
When we talk about trauma in law enforcement, we're not talking about one-time events. We're talking about repeated exposure to human suffering, danger, and crisis. Officers witness accidents, violence, loss, and chaos on a near-daily basis. This creates what Elaine Miller-Karras calls a high trauma load. Imagine carrying a backpack that gets a little heavier after every critical call. Even if one event doesn't seem overwhelming, the accumulation of all those experiences adds up over time. That's what many officers carry, a nervous system that's constantly adapting to high-stress situations with little time to rest and reset. Policing culture values control, composure, and toughness. Officers are trained to stay calm under pressure and never to show fear or vulnerability. This mindset is helpful on the job. It helps them think clearly when lives are on the line. But that same strength can become a wall. The belief that real officers don't break down or you have to stay in control at all times often leads to emotional suppression. Feelings get pushed down, buried under professionalism. Unfortunately, those suppressed emotions don't disappear. They are stored in the body and resurface as anxiety, irritability, or even health issues. Because officers must constantly scan for danger, their bodies stay in a near permanent state of hypervigilance, that on alert survival mode. While this state enhances reaction time in emergencies, it becomes exhausting when it never turns off. Over time, this leads to hypervigilance fatigue. The nervous system wears down. The person might feel jumpy, restless, or emotionally numb, alternating between wired and wiped out. Sleep becomes difficult, and everyday stressors feel magnified. Burnout in law enforcement often looks different from that in other professions. It's not just about long hours, it's about moral fatigue, the emotional exhaustion that comes from serving others while feeling unsupported or misunderstood. Officers may feel detached, cynical, or hopeless. They can lose the sense of purpose that initially drove them to protect and serve. This loss of meaning compounds the physiological exhaustion of constant readiness. Even when officers aren't directly victimized, they absorb trauma from others. This is called secondary traumatic stress, the emotional residue from hearing or witnessing another person's trauma. Compassion fatigue goes hand in hand. It's when the natural empathy that helps officers connect with others becomes depleted. They may find themselves becoming numb to suffering or impatient with those they're trying to help. This isn't a lack of caring, it's the cost of caring deeply for too long without adequate recovery. Understanding trauma in policing isn't about judgment, it's about humanity. Officers are not only first responders, they are also first witnesses to the world's pain. Without supportive systems like the Community Resiliency Model, CRM, Constant exposure can erode well-being in relationships. The key takeaway for future clinicians, supervisors, or policy advocates: trauma doesn't just affect the people officers serve, it affects the officers themselves. Healing begins when we create space for vulnerability, regulation, and recovery. Although it appears that we are exhausting the steps of CRM, it is still necessary to discuss the different tenets so you can see how they can be utilized by law enforcement. Remember, CRM isn't therapy in the traditional sense. It's a set of wellness skills anyone can learn to bring the nervous system back into balance. Think of it as a kind of owner's manual for your body's stress response. And, as you recall, we all have a resilient zone, the state where our body and mind are calm, alert, and able to think clearly. When we're too activated, we might feel anxious, angry, or hyper alert. When we're shut down, we might feel numb, tired, or disconnected. CRM helps us notice where we are and move back into that resilient zone, our zone of okayness. These are the practical tools that help us return to balance and stay resilient. Tracking. Paying attention to sensations in your body. Tension, warmth, tingling, calm. Helps you recognize when your body is stressed or settled. Resourcing. Thinking about people, places, memories, or even pets that make you feel safe or strong brings positive sensations into the body. Grounding. Using your senses to connect with the present moment. Feeling your feet on the floor. Noticing your surroundings. Helps stop spiraling thoughts and brings focus back to now. Then we move on with gesturing, simple physical movements that comfort or stabilize you. Placing a hand on your heart, crossing your arms, or taking a steady breath reminds the body that it's safe. Help now. Skills, quick actions you can use in the moment to calm down. Counting colors in the room, naming objects, feeling textures, or walking. These are especially useful in a crisis or when grounding isn't enough. Shift and stay. Once you notice you're feeling better, pause and stay with that good feeling for a few seconds. This reinforces your brain's ability to find balance again. It's like building a resilience muscle. Let's look at how applying the community resiliency model to law enforcement works. Law enforcement professionals face some of the highest levels of occupational stress of any profession. Every day, officers encounter unpredictable, often life-threatening situations. From violent calls to witnessing tragedy firsthand. This constant exposure takes a toll not only on the mind but also on the body's nervous system, which is wired for survival, not endless alertness. CRM offers a fresh, practical approach to wellness that fits within the realities of police work. It's not about therapy, but about training the nervous system the same way officers train for tactical readiness. Police officers live in what Elaine Miller Karras calls high arousal loops. That means their nervous systems often stay activated long after an incident ends. The sympathetic nervous system, the fight, flight, or freeze response, is constantly firing. Over time, the resilient zone, The range where the body feels balanced and alert narrows. Officers might feel wired, tense, or hyper alert on duty, but completely drained or numb off duty. This state is sometimes described as hypervigilance fatigue, a kind of exhaustion that comes from living with your foot on a gas pedal all day. It can lead to insomnia, irritability, emotional detachment, or even risky coping behaviors. Then we have the cultural barriers, stoicism and control. Police culture prizes control, composure, and courage. These are essential in emergencies, but they can also become barriers to emotional regulation. Many officers are trained to push through rather than tune in. That's where problems can grow quietly. Emotional suppression becomes the norm. Admitting stress may feel like weakness. Peer culture often rewards toughness rather than vulnerability. CRM gently disrupts this pattern by reframing regulation as strength rather than softness. What makes CRM such a powerful fit for law enforcement is its practical, science-based language. It doesn't label or diagnose. It educates and empowers. CRM becomes a bridge between performance and wellness. Officers learn that being regulated improves judgment, decision-making, and reaction time under pressure. Individual and team. When peers learn to recognize each other's stress cues, it strengthens unit cohesion and morale. Department and community. A calm, grounded officer communicates safety and empathy, even in tense encounters, fostering trust and de-escalation. Officers can integrate CRM into their routines without disrupting workflow. During roll call, practice tracking sensations or short grounding exercises. After high-stress calls, use help now skills to settle before returning to duty. In academy training, the instructors teach recruits about their nervous system as part of tactical performance. In peer wellness programs, officers are encouraged to share and model regulation skills with others. Departments that have introduced CRM often find that officers report CRM helps law enforcement professionals move from constant reactivity to responsive readiness. It respects the discipline and dignity of police work while offering accessible tools to sustain wellness. Rather than telling officers to calm down or get help, CRM shows them how to return to balance, reclaim focus, and reconnect to their humanity, both on and off duty. Better sleep and emotional balance. Fewer conflicts at home. Greater clarity in high-stakes decision-making. Reduce stigma around stress and support seeking. Now let's see CRM in practice. The following is a case example. In San Bernardino, California, after a mass shooting incident, officers trained in CRM reported increased ability to reset after exposure to traumatic scenes and return to family life with greater emotional availability. When the Community Resiliency Model, CRM, is introduced into law enforcement, it's not just about teaching stress reduction techniques. It's about changing the culture of how officers understand and manage their own biology. Police departments are traditionally built on command, control, and discipline, qualities that ensure safety in the field. But those same values can unintentionally create environments where emotional self-care feels out of place. CRM changes that by normalizing physiological awareness as part of professional readiness. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with this officer?" CRM encourages departments to ask, "What's happening in their nervous system, and how can we support regulation?" That's the beginning of a cultural shift, from pathology to physiology, from stigma to skill. CRM thrives when it's not delivered to officers, but by them. Departments that adopt a peer-to-peer training model often see the greatest success because credibility is everything in police culture. Why peer training works? Officers are more likely to trust and engage when the message comes from someone who wears the same badge. Peer trainers model CRM skills in relatable, real-world ways, not as therapy, but as tactical self-regulation. It builds a shared language for wellness. Terms like resilient zone or tracking become part of everyday talk in the squad room. So another case example. A veteran officer who practices grounding before shift briefings might informally lead others through a 60-second breathing reset. Over time, this becomes a norm, a micro-ritual of readiness that reinforces calm and focus. This approach mirrors the CRM principle of social contagion. Resilience spreads through relationships and modeling, just as stress does. One of the most innovative ways to embed CRM is by linking it to operational performance, where officers already focus their attention and pride. Tactical briefings and after-action reviews are prime opportunities to practice CRM skills. Pre-brief grounding. Officers check in with their body sensations, regulate their breathing, and center their focus before entering high-stress environments. Post-incident tracking. After a call, teams take a minute to identify how their bodies feel, tightness, shaking, or calm, without judgment. Help now resets. If tension or confusion rises during debriefs, a brief sensory focus, e.g. noticing colors, feeling feet on the floor, can bring everyone back into the resilient zone. These aren't touchy-feely moments. They're tactical performance resets designed to keep decision-making sharp and team communication steady. When CRM becomes part of the rhythm of daily policing, as natural as checking weapons or reviewing routes, officers begin to associate regulation with readiness, not weakness. Beyond the field, CRM principles can anchor department-wide wellness initiatives. A comprehensive approach might include annual resilience refreshers led by certified CRM peer trainers, wellness check-ins where officers use CRM language to self-assess their stress levels, integration with EAP or mental health teams to ensure continuity between psychological and physiological care, family workshops teaching grounding and resourcing skills at home, strengthening resilience across support systems. Departments that integrate CRM report improved morale, lower absenteeism, and increased retention because officers start to feel seen not just as enforcers, but as human beings with bodies that need recovery as much as retraining. As more officers internalize CRM, the department's emotional tone begins to shift. Commanders who model self-regulation send a powerful message. Composure isn't the absence of stress, it's the mastery of recovery. This creates a psychologically safe environment where acknowledging stress is normal. Team accountability around resilience, not just performance. Healthier community engagement, because regulated officers regulate encounters. Ultimately, CRM and departmental culture reframes wellness as collective readiness. It's not an add-on, it's a mindset, one that helps departments evolve from reactive to responsive, from burned out to balanced. At its heart, the Community Resiliency Model, CRM, is a neurobiological training system. It helps people, including law enforcement officers, understand what's happening in their brains and bodies when stress strikes and how to regain balance. When we're under threat, our nervous system takes over long before our thinking brain can respond. CRM teaches officers how to work with their body's natural wiring instead of fighting against it. Every human being has what's called a resilience zone, a range where the nervous system is balanced and flexible. In this zone, we can think clearly, stay connected to others, and respond, not react. However, when officers face danger, that zone can easily be disrupted. High activation, fight, flight. The body surges with energy, heart rate spikes, adrenaline pumps, and muscles tense. The goal? Survive. Low activation, shut down. When stress feels overwhelming or never-ending, the system can crash. Officers might feel numb, detached, or fatigued. CRM helps individuals recognize where they are on this spectrum, high, low, or in the resilient middle, and use body-based tools to return to balance. CRM aligns beautifully with polyvagal theory, developed by neuroscientist Stephen Porges. Polyvagal theory explains how our autonomic nervous system, the automatic autopilot in our body, responds to stress in three main states. Social engagement, safe and connected. In this state, we can communicate, think clearly, and connect with others. Mobilization, fight, flight. Excited, we're ready for action. Energy, alertness, fast reactions. Immobilization, freeze, shut down. The body attempts to conserve energy or play dead in response to an extreme threat. CRM provides officers with the language and awareness necessary for these states. Instead of labeling themselves as angry or checked out, they can say, "My body is in high activation right now. I need to ground." This reframing shifts judgment to curiosity, reducing shame and promoting self-awareness. Repeated stress, especially in policing, can shrink the resilience zone over time. Officers who are constantly exposed to trauma may find that even small triggers push them into fight, flight, or shutdown. Practicing CRM expands the resilience zone by training the nervous system to recover more quickly. It's like strengthening a muscle. The more officers use grounding and tracking, the faster their body returns to balance after stress. This doesn't mean officers stop reacting to danger. It means they can recover quicker and return to clear thinking sooner. Cortisol is the body's main stress hormone, essential for survival, but harmful when it stays elevated too long. In law enforcement, chronic cortisol levels can lead to fatigue and sleep disturbances, impaired memory and concentration, increased irritability or aggression, and weakened immune response. CRM helps regulate cortisol naturally. By calming the nervous system, the body stops sending out emergency signals. Over time, this leads to better physical health, emotional balance, and cognitive control. The psychological benefits: clearer, calmer, more connected. When officers are in their resilient zone, something powerful happens. Situational awareness. They notice more without overreacting. Decision making. The prefrontal cortex, thinking brain, stays online, allowing for rational, ethical judgment. Reduced reactivity. They can respond with intention instead of impulse. In high-stakes policing, these aren't nice-to-have skills. They're essential for de-escalation, safety, and trust building. A regulated nervous system makes it easier to read body language, communicate calmly, and recognize when others are in distress. So, more or less, CRM teaches officers to identify the body's stress signals, regulate their nervous system, and stay in control, not by suppressing emotion, but by mastering it. It turns neuroscience into a practical resilience toolkit, strengthening both personal wellness and professional performance. Barriers and ethical considerations, bringing CRM into the real world. Implementing the Community Resiliency Model, CRM, in law enforcement is not just a matter of training, it's a matter of cultural readiness. While the science behind CRM is precise, applying it within the structured, high-pressure world of policing requires sensitivity to organizational norms, power dynamics, and ethical boundaries. Let's examine both the barriers that hinder implementation and the ethical principles that guide successful and respectful implementation. What are some of the barriers to implementation? First, you may hear, "We're not therapists." This is an example of organizational resistance. Many law enforcement agencies hesitate to bring in anything that looks or sounds therapeutic. There's a deep-seated belief that therapy belongs to counselors, not cops. Officers are trained to take action, not introspect. So wellness programs can feel foreign or even threatening to the identity of strength and self-sufficiency that policing culture prizes. The advantage of implementing CRM: it's not therapy, it's neuroscience-based training. By framing it as a performance and regulatory skill, departments can view it as a tactical enhancement rather than an emotional exposure. Secondly, cultural mistrust of emotional language. Law enforcement communities often view words like feelings, stress, or emotions as soft or unprofessional. Emotional vulnerability has historically been equated with weakness. This mistrust can make officers reluctant to engage in practices that ask them to notice sensations or emotions, even though those skills improve safety and clarity. CRM's bridge. It reframes self-regulation as a physiological process, not an emotional confession. Officers learn to track body cues instead of talking about feelings, which keeps the process accessible, practical, and grounded in science. Number 3, time constraints and operational demands. In law enforcement, time is a scarce resource. Officers juggle calls, paperwork, court appearances, and overtime. Finding time for training or wellness can feel impossible, especially when the system prioritizes tactical readiness over personal recovery. CRM's solution. It's designed for integration, not interruption. Skills like grounding or help now can be practiced in under a minute. Departments can insert short CRM moments into roll calls, debriefs, or shift changes. In other words, CRM can fit into the day rather than on top of it. Then there's the ethical and cultural considerations. Even when CRM is welcomed, its success depends on how it's delivered. Ethical practice requires thoughtful consideration of power, privacy, and culture, starting with confidentiality and voluntary participation. Officers must know that what they share or practice during CRM sessions stays private. If a department turns wellness into surveillance, using participation to evaluate fitness for duty, trust collapses. CRM facilitators and peer trainers should clearly communicate that participation is voluntary and that sharing experiences is never mandatory. Ethically, CRM should always empower, never coerce. Another facet to consider is non-clinical framing. CRM is educational, not diagnostic. Ethically, trainers must stay within scope. They're teaching biological self-awareness, not providing therapy. When deeper trauma surfaces, facilitators should have referral pathways to licensed mental health professionals. This ensures safety and protects professional boundaries. You also have cultural responsiveness. CRM training should reflect the diversity of the officers and communities it serves. That means acknowledging how race, gender, and community relationships shape trauma. For instance, officers of color may experience dual stress from the dangers of policing and from racialized experiences within and outside the force. Communities that have historically distrusted police may interpret officers' stress responses differently. Culturally responsive CRM training opens space for empathy and shared humanity, helping officers see how both sides of a community encounter can carry trauma. This then leads to the use of the community healing lens. Ultimately, ethics in CRM extend beyond the individual. When officers regulate their own nervous systems, they also serve as models for others, including citizens, colleagues, and family members. This creates a ripple effect of safety that benefits entire communities. Ethically, CRM invites law enforcement to become agents of healing, not just enforcement. Ultimately, CRM in law enforcement necessitates more than just skilled training. It requires a cultural transformation. Barriers remind us that resilience work must meet officers where they are. Ethical practice ensures CRM remains inclusive, voluntary, and culturally sensitive. The ultimate goal is not only officer wellness, but mutual resilience between law enforcement and the community.
So, as we wrap up this chapter, I just wanted to present to you some reflective questions that might be used when we're implementing CRM with law enforcement. And it's to help improve officer decision making when they're under pressure. So, what are those type of ethical implications that teaching resilience tools can be utilized for positions of authority? That's one. How can CRM help to shift policing culture toward trauma-informed practices? That's two. Then we might consider what might a community look like if both officers and the citizens practice CRM together. So these are some questions that you might pose to yourself, pose to those you're working with, to kind of help broaden how to go about making decisions that would be beneficial for all parties involved. All right, so we're going to wrap up chapter 9 here. I'm going to stop with this. However, I do have some other things I would like for you to watch and view. There's going to be another video lecture that I wanted to share with you. It was actually a lecture I did earlier this week with my other course, but it's so relative to what we're talking about that I decided I wanted to share it with you. And it's talking about hate. which also will be involved in talking about with law enforcement and such. So please make sure you watch both videos. I'm also going to be providing you with a movie, The Hate That You Give. I would like for you to watch that. And you'll also have the assignment, a reflective assignment that's going to be in regards to both video lectures. I know I got a lot on your plate this week, but please bear with me. I think it's really important and will provide you with a lot of information that's going to actually be helpful in working with other people that within the community and in terms of our topic this evening. So on that note, again, I thank you so much for listening, and I want y'all to have a great weekend, a great next week, and we'll talk again soon. Peace.